કીધું તું મને ઝેરોક્સ કરાવી આવીશ ને આજ સોમવાર છે હા સીધું તું કરાવી ને ઝેરોક્સ
Someone, Tejal? Are you scolding someone?
sorry
Problem? I hope you're not scolding us.
yes ma'am
Okay. How was the test? Good?
Yes, sir.
It was easy? Okay. I'm happy to hear that. Let's start discussing answers from part A.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Hi, good
Good
afternoon.
afternoon.
Good afternoon. all. It's raining here in Amritsar, like it's pouring since morning. And it's very cold today. Yeah, since yesterday, yes, right. But yesterday we were in our quilts, so we didn't feel anything. Okay. So let's begin with the first answer here. What did you write, please? Celiac.
Disease.
That's correct. So the spelling for celiac is this. But even if you have written this, you know that you will get marks because the pronunciation is still same. But for the safe side, you should memorize these spellings for common diseases. So celiac spells as C-O-E. Even if you write C-E-L, that will also give you marks. Second one,
Conceive.
conceive or get pregnant or have children. Anything would do.
C-I-E. It's C-E-N.
Yeah, you wrote C-I-E-L-I-A-C.
Conceive. C-O-N-C-I-E.
Oh, C-O-N-C-I-E. Okay, you might get marks because that is a common error with E and I, but it's C-O-N-C-E-I.
If I would like
Ma'am, I write C-I-L-I-A-C.
That's not conceive, that's concise.
But lighter.
I-A-C. No, that's celiac. Yeah, you were saying something? Suman or Krishna, I'm not sure who.
Ma'am, answer of third is much lighter.
That's correct, absolutely. But much is just an adjective, so can be skipped. Lighter is the answer. Periods are lighter, much lighter, or light. No, those are now light. Those used to be heavy, are now light. I will play that for you. Fourth one, thinner. Thinner here.
Thinning.
Yes.
Thinning.
Thinning. Yeah. Write in a way that your assessor will be able to read it, okay? If you're not able to read your own handwriting, how will they be able to read it? Okay. Yeah. Thinning hair or thin hair. Then eyes appear.
Bulging. Bulging.
Bulging. Wonderful. Bulging. Then sixth one.
Heat. Heat.
Yes, intolerance to heat. Okay, just a second. Who's that? Manpreet or Mandeep? Somebody. Yeah, Manpreet. You wrote much low. Much low for which answer? Periods? About periods, you've written much. Third one? Periods are much low. No, we cannot say periods are much low. And the question is, yeah, lighter. Lighter is okay. Much lighter, lighter, light. Thinning is wrong, Tejinder. We cannot say thinning, it's thinning. If you this E is a typing error. And thinny is also wrong, Saumi, because that does not make sense to say that here are thinny. Here are thinning hair or thin hair. Seventh, please.
Tremor, ma'am.
That's correct. Tremor. Eighth one is
Feet.
feet or top of feet. Yeah, feet. Okay, I'll tell you why it's not soles.
Single and in beginning part.
Yeah, that's okay. Hanji, kaha tha, but on the soles of your feet, the skin is already coarse. She was using it as an example that on the top also is coarse. It's coarse just like my soles. Okay, I will play that for you. Ninth,
Irritable.
mood described as irritable. Irritable, yes. Irritate will not be correct. Irritable. Mood is described as irritable. Then 10th,
Pernicious anemia.
pernicious anemia. Now Kajal, I'm saying Achal did call me the other day because she was assessing your answer sheets and she was saying that some students have written anemia. So she was asking me, will that be a correct answer? And I told her that no, only anemia will not be correct because here this is a type of anemia, right? So if there is a specification given, you always have to write it. You cannot miss on that. Like if you look at this one, suppose feet. So they say top of feet. So it's not a specification. Or when they say light, much is just an adjective, not a specification. It's just telling me a little more about that noun, but it's not adding a type to that noun. So Suman, it's not pernicious, it's pernicious. Pernicious anemia, so PER. And because it's a type, so only anemia will not be correct answer as some of you have written. So please do not intentionally skip on some important words if you listen to them. Also, the abbreviation for pernicious anemia, which is universally accepted, is PA. So you can go for that as well. PA you can write if you're confused about pernicious anemia. Yeah, anemia, if you have written like this, ANEMIA, that will still be fine. That is not a problem. 11.
Radioactive
iodine uptake, ma'am.
Radioactive iodine uptake.
Iodine uptake. So full answer. And the last one is
Thyroid gland.
Thyroid gland.
thyroid or thyroid gland. Scan of thyroid or scan of thyroid gland. Then no marks will be given.
Ma'am, I wrote radioactive iodine optic.
Radioactive iodine?
Optic.
Optic. Oh, no. That's not. Optic is OPTIC. So no. The person is endocrinologist and...
The seventh one. Developed.
Sorry, seventh one?
Developed.
See, reports. Tremor. Reports developed tremor makes sense. Yeah. Reports tremor developed still is fine.
One tremor in her hands.
Sorry?
Tremor in hand.
Tremor in hands. Yeah, that's hands is in bracket. So I will not be using a preposition for a word which is given in bracket. Yeah. Okay, let's listen from the beginning.
Each extract. In this, complete the notes 12. Silvana Hilier short phrase. You now have 30 seconds to look.
Here, but perhaps you could tell. So, Mrs. Hillier, I've got your notes here, but perhaps you could tell me in your own words about the symptoms you've been having. You've had a couple of health problems over the last year or so, I think.
That's right. Well, I've been having some digestive problems for a while. And about a year and a half ago, I was diagnosed with celiac disease. I've had to drastically change my diet, but I'm coping all right with it overall.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, I watch what I eat and feel a lot better as a result. So much so that that's my husband
Good afternoon, sir. की हाल
and I, well, we've always wanted children, so we thought it was a good time to do something about it. But after a year of trying, I just don't seem to be able to conceive.
Yeah, after a year of trying, I just don't seem to be able to conceive. So conceive or get pregnant or have children. So the person but said conceive, so you can stick to that.
I didn't think there'd be any problem, to be honest, so we're wondering whether to get checked out in case there's something wrong.
Well, let's try and find out if it's linked with your other symptoms. How have you been these last few months?
I had a horrible bout of flu about 3 months ago. It laid me...
Horrible bout of flu. Horrible bout of. So bout is again a word which is quite repeated. In informal way, the patients do mostly use it like an episode of. Bout of flu, she said. Horrible bout of. So severe. Severe is horrible here.
Really low for a couple of weeks. In fact, I blame these new symptoms on that at first because flu takes a while to get over, but I soon realised that they aren't really typical of flu.
Okay. So could you describe the symptoms you're experiencing now?
Sure. Well, the first thing I noticed was my periods. I mean, they've never been very heavy, but they're certainly much lighter now.
They have never been much heavy, but they are certainly much lighter now. And what are we looking at? Current symptoms. They have never been heavy. So she's saying they've never been heavy, but certainly now they are much lighter. So the word you have to pick here is lighter or much lighter, because that's the current symptom.
And something which has increased is the number of times I go to the toilet. I need to go 3 or 4 times a day now.
You mean 3 or 4 bowel movements?
Yes. And what's bothering me too is my hair. Can you see? It's thinning,
Right.
which I hate. I always had such lovely hair, to be honest. So this is
So it's thinning. So thinning hair.
really making me feel self-conscious.
Yeah.
And something else I'm embarrassed about is my eyes. You must have noticed how bulging they look. They never looked like that before.
Yes, I understand. It must be making things difficult.
It is. And I've noticed that my heart often seems to race, and I don't know why.
Again, heart racing, heart race, which they use for palpitations. We keep on discussing this as well.
And I usually love my holidays, the usual things, you know, like swimming and sunbathing. But I've noticed that I really can't stand heat now.
Right.
That's just not like...
I can't stand heat now. Intolerance to heat. Can't stand it. Again, the patient is just using informal language, but the notes are given in a formal way.
like me. I can't bear it now, so I stay inside to avoid it. I sweat profusely too. Not nice. Again, that was never a problem in the past.
I see. And what about your mobility? Has that been affected?
No, that's okay. I'm not having any problem walking or anything like that. But something that is causing problems is my hands. They've developed a tremor.
Right.
It makes even simple things like holding a cup difficult, so I'm always worried I'll drop hot coffee over me. But as I say, walking is okay. The skin on my feet feels strange, though. It's gone quite thick and coarse. I know that can happen on the soles, but not here, on the top.
You listen what she said? She said, I know that can happen on the soles, but not here on the top. So she's talking about coarse skin, thick skin on the top of feet or on feet, not on the soles.
That's why I noticed it.
And have you experienced any mood changes at all?
Well, I used to be quite easygoing, but I must say these days I feel really irritable most of the time.
Again, another word, the characteristic of the patient, easygoing. Easygoing is a person who takes things lightly, who are not stressed or irritated on, petty issues. So she calls herself easygoing, but these days she says she's irritable. So uncharacteristically, sometimes this word can also be used. Patient is now uncharacteristically irritable or irritated most of the times.
Easygoing, but I must say these days I feel really irritable most of the time. It's probably a result of these symptoms, but it's making things difficult,
Yeah.
especially my relationship with my husband. And I'm so tired all the time too, which doesn't help.
Mm-hmm. And what about your family? Are your parents healthy?
My dad is, but my mum's had pernicious anemia for...
My mom's had pernicious anemia for. So pernicious anemia. What about this? Okay, I think I've answered this question already. Ruben, tremors. Okay, tremors for reports tremors. Yeah, that's okay. That's not impacting grammar, so you will get marks for tremors also.
Well, as long as I can remember. She copes okay, but, well, obviously they're both worried about what's wrong with me. We really want to get to the bottom of it and find out what's happening.
Okay, well, we need to do some tests. I'll order some blood tests and also what we call a radioactive iodine uptake test, which will help with diagnosis. And something else I'd like to do is get a scan organised of your thyroid gland. Now, if you'd like me to have a close...
That's it. Scan organized for thyroid or thyroid gland. I would prefer you write thyroid gland. However, the answer key says that thyroid is also correct. But if you listen to something, write it completely. Don't miss on the words. Let's come to the second one. Yes, you can help me with the answers first and then I can play it all together. 13th.
Hypertension.
Hypertension.
Hypertension. Thank you. 14th.
Loss of appetite.
Appetite.
Loss of appetite. 15th.
Weakness.
Generalized weakness.
Okay, generalized weakness. I can put generalized also or generalized.
Madam.
Hanji, yes, please. Yes, Ruben. Ruben, you're saying something? Someone did call me.
Can we write just as weakness, ma'am?
Yes, we can. I have put generalized in bracket. You don't have to make brackets, but yes, you can just write weakness. Yeah, general weakness is also fine. What about 16?
Yellowing of skin.
Yellowing or slight yellowing. Yellowing. Then blood vessels, that's correct.
Blood vessels.
Hello?
Yes, Krishna. Okay, I would request.
No, ma'am.
Okay. Then ultrasound.
Ultrasound scan.
Ultrasound scan.
USG scan.
USG, yeah, ultrasound scan, USG.
Ma'am, USG scan is correct or not?
USG scan.
Yes, ma'am.
USG is ultrasonography.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So is the word scan required now?
No, ma'am.
USG would be USG or ultrasound scan. You don't need to write USG scan.
Ultrasonography.
I heard ultrasound scan.
Yeah, either write ultrasound scan or write USG. Why would you write USG scan? Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
So this is right or wrong?
I'm only ultrasound.
Yeah, only ultrasound is okay. The word scan is not that important. So I don't want you to unnecessarily put it. Ultrasound scan or just USG.
Ma'am, yellowish is the right or wrong?
Reported yellowish of skin. You can tell me if it makes any grammatical sense to you. Reported yellowish of skin. No? So if the grammar is wrong, no answers will be given. Because at the end, it is an English test. So it reports yellowing of skin. You want to be kind to you? You can mark it right. I will not. 19th.
Dilated veins.
Ins.
20
Beta blockers.
Blockers.
beta blockers. 21
Protein.
protein. I hope we are following. Yeah, I'm not listening anything from Mohali. I just, whenever you want to say anything, please feel free to unmute. Then next is
Diuretic tablet.
Tablets.
diuretic. Yeah, diuretic tablets or diuretics. Diuretic tablets. Okay. 23
Moderate intensity.
Moderate intensity.
Muscle wasting.
excellent, moderate intensity.
Intensity exercise.
It's already written.
Exercise, ma'am.
Yeah, exercise is written, no? Exercise, moderate intensity. So you're not going to repeat that. Now, if you write exercise, it's going to be wrong. So just moderate intensity. And then last is
Muscle wasting.
Muscle wasting.
wasting. So if you repeat the word exercise again here, that will be an error of redundancy. And that will be negative.
Madam, on the directed, the spelling on directed, is it
Yes, Ruben.
yeah, on the spelling, I wrote DILATED. Now
Your
that one
spellings are
is
correct. Mine was a typing error. My bad. Sorry. Dilated wings. That is correct.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Yes. Now, what were you saying? Only appetite. Achha. Why? Nausea and appetite. Symptom है. Doctor, मुझे भूख लगती है. बंद कर दो. Like, give me some medicine. I shouldn't be eating anything. I was saying that we will not be repeating the word exercise because it's already given.
Ma'am, I
So-
wrote beta in symbols.
Yeah, that is okay. That is okay. Beta in symbol is okay because we universally use it. Shall we listen?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Sure.
ma'am.
Let's start.
To look at
It's with a word.
Could you tell me in your own words, please, how this all started and any treatment you've had?
So this time when I'm playing, rather than talking to each other, you can focus on the language. It will help.
Oh, I'd been overweight for a long time, and it was always a struggle to control my weight. I've got hypertension, which I'm sure is related to this, and so I have to go for checkups every year. My cholesterol level is high too, though I can't remember the figures. I was put on statins to help deal with it.
I see. And when did you start to experience symptoms that concerned you?
I hadn't really been fit for years, so it's hard to put an exact date on things. But I'd say about 18 months ago, I was feeling nauseous a lot, and I was experiencing a loss of appetite.
Nauseous a lot and loss of appetite.
I didn't worry too much initially and thought it might even be good because I'd eat less. I was much more bothered by this general sense of weakness.
Right.
I thought it was just one of those winter viruses that I often get and find hard to shake off, but
So now the word feelings is already written, so you will not be repeating sense here. Yeah, he said general sense of weakness, but feelings is already written. So feelings of weakness, that sense of weakness, of sense of general weakness or generalized weakness, that is okay.
it turned out I was wrong.
So how did things develop after that?
The big thing that happened next, though it was a gradual process, I guess, was more unsettling than any other symptoms up to that point. I noticed this slight yellowing of my skin, which other people confirmed, so it wasn't just my imagination. My tummy was swollen too, and I could clearly see all these blood vessels just above my waist. They looked really horrible. I'd never seen anything like that before.
Okay.
Anyway, I felt so bad that I saw my doctor, and he sent me to the hospital straight away.
So you had a range of tests at this point, I presume?
Yeah, I think so. One blood test showed that my liver function was all messed up.
Right.
Yeah, noticing liver function was all messed up, impaired. So the patient will keep on saying things in a very informal way. But in the case notes, it will be written formally.
Remember, I had an ultrasound scan too, and that found my liver was inflamed. It was more damaged than they expected. And it was a shock, really, because although I knew I was unfit, I wasn't a heavy drinker. Anyway, they reckoned I'd had non-alcoholic fatty liver disease.
They reckoned, RECKONED, which you can add to your list. They reckoned I had non-alcoholic fatty liver. Reckoned, believed.
Some years, and it's just got slowly worse and worse and developed into the cirrhosis I have now.
And you had an endoscopy to check out your esophagus too, I believe.
Yeah, the doctors I saw at the hospital were very concerned about some dilated veins in my esophagus, so I had some treatment immediately to prevent them bleeding. They said it was potentially very dangerous, and so that's why they acted so quickly. I was also given beta blockers. I think that's what they're called.
Yes, that's right. And have you discussed with my colleagues the need for dietary changes?
Yes, I've already cut right back on my salt intake.
Good.
My diet's been pretty poor for ages. Partly because I was often so tired when I got home from work, I was just eating too much junk, to be honest.
I see.
Anyway, I was told I needed to have a bit more protein, which I think I've managed to do.
Yeah, a bit more protein. So increase protein in diet.
I asked about all the fluid in my body, around the stomach and ankles in particular, and we talked about how to deal with that. I was given diuretic tablets. Yeah, I think they've made a difference.
Good. Now, let's look at the next stage of the treatment, Mr. Cunningham.
Well, I was told I need to get fitter, which didn't surprise me. Apparently you or someone will talk to me about something called, what was it, a moderate intensity exercise program? Yeah.
Moderate intensity exercise program. So exercise is written, now only moderate intensity program suggested for exercise.
That sounds okay, I suppose.
There's nothing to worry about with that. You'll be given advice on how to build up the amount of exercise you do fairly gradually.
It's to stop muscle wasting or something.
It is to stop muscle wasting or something. So we will write muscle wasting. We will not write muscle waste.
Sounds serious, doesn't it?
Well, I'm afraid it's a common problem in patients with your condition. But there's a lot we can do to prevent it, so don't worry. Now, let's just review the medication you're currently...
So that's it. Now, any questions for part A? Only diuretics, guys. Time. Diuretics have been effective. Diuretics have been effective. Or diuretic tablets have been effective. They have made a difference.
And then only
Question number 7.
Okay, one by one. Yes, we'll start from Suman.
For 13, HDN is correct.
13?
Yes, ma'am. Hypertension. I wrote HDN.
Yeah, that is okay. That's fine.
Okay, ma'am.
Ruben?
yes, on the first text on the number 11, I omitted radioactive. I just wrote iodine uptake.
Oh, I'm sorry, not for that one. That will be missing a word from the main answer. So no. Yes, Irfan. Trauma, tremor. Trauma or tremor? You want to write trauma instead of tremor?
No, ma'am, he's asking about the answer. What is the answer of question number 7?
Answer, okay. The answer is tremor. Reports tremor. Tremor is the answer. Trauma is not. Trauma is entirely different in spelling as well as meaning. Yes, Raman?
Ma'am, in 22 questions, I wrote a diuretic tablet, not tablets. Is that correct?
Diuretic tablet. No, you see, have is written now. So how can I
Okay.
write singular? That will be a subject-verb agreement error. So no,
Yes,
if grammatically it's wrong, then no marks.
thank you.
Ma'am, for the 19 one, I wrote dilated vein, only vein.
Then dilated vein.
Yes, ma'am.
No, that's also wrong. There is not just one vein. There are veins dilated, which could bleed, he said. So no. Okay, then Sanchita, 14th, loss of appetite. You're asking or you're helping someone? Not sure.
Ma'am, I didn't use double P on appetite.
Right, double brain appetite. That's okay. That still works, but please be careful. At the end, you all are going to get 2 minutes to check your answers. So I want you to proofread your answers. Okay, don't just keep looking here and there, thinking that okay, the paper is over. Please do proofread. Appetite is a very, very common word. So let's not make spelling errors, which are quite silly, right? So please do recheck after writing. At the end, last 2 minutes, not while writing. Sometimes happens, like when we are in hurry, we do make these kind of little errors, but then at the end, when you get 2 minutes, come back to your answers and make these kind of corrections. It's necessary. For 10th, I only write anemia. As we already discussed that's pernicious anemia, and that's an important word here because it's a specification of the disease. So for only anemia, marks will not be given. Then you wrote only appetite. That is wrong, Priyanka, because that's not a symptom. Symptom is nausea. Only appetite is not a symptom. Like having an appetite is a common thing. Having a lot of appetite or having less appetite, loss of appetite, these are symptoms. So symptoms are nausea and loss of appetite, not just having appetite. That's a normal thing. Every human being has an appetite, like every living creature. So no, that's not a symptom. Symptom is loss or lot. But here it's loss because he said initially he thought it's okay because he would eat less. But then later on he realized that it was causing weakness and all the rest of the things. Is that all? Shall we move on? Okay, you're welcome. Shall we move on to part B?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, let's come to part B. So what did we pick for 25?
B.
B, ma'am.
All of us for B?
Yes, B.
Yes, ma'am.
Excellent. B is the correct answer. Now,
No,
anybody?
ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. I picked A, ma'am.
A, you picked A? Okay. Now, like we do, 15 seconds you're getting for each question. So you're reading the question and then you're thinking whether you're listening for a specific detail or gist. That's the very first thing you're doing. So you hear a radiologist talking to a patient about MRI scan here.
Part B. Choose the answer. You will have time to read 5. You now read the question.
So you now know the context. Radiologist and patient about MRI scan. Her main reason for talking to him is. Now all these words, her and him, are telling you a little more about the question if you read them properly. Her means the radiologist. That means your radiologist is going to be a female and the patient is going to be a male. So why is this radiologist talking to the patient? What is her main reason? Because this is an incomplete question. It's just a question stem. We're going to convert it into a complete question. So what is the radiologist's main concern for talking to the patient? So you're looking for the main reason. What is the main reason for talking to the patient? Will it be gist or specific detail?
Just, ma'am.
Detail.
main reason. Main reason will be
Specific.
I think it will be specific detail. Main reason for talking to the patient. Now here it says you hear a radiologist talking to a patient. So who's going to do most of the talking? Radiologist. And now the radiologist can talk to the patient about something, about this MRI scan. So you're looking for the reason behind it. What is the main reason for talking to the patient? So I believe it is going to be a specific detail, but if you don't find it in specific detail, probably then you can take a chance with gist. But the first initial thought is going to be specific detail. I'm going to listen for main reason. If they don't use anything like that, probably then I can match and check. So to explain the procedure to be followed, this is why she is talking. To reassure him about the concerns, this is why she is talking. To clarify why the test is necessary, this is why she is talking. I will listen and find out the reason behind their discussion about this MRI.
Scan will take around... So, Mr. Thomas, the scan will take around 30 minutes and will cover mainly your liver, though we may look at the prostate too for reasons we discussed last time. I believe you were informed about removing all metal objects before the scan, including jewellery?
Yes, your colleague went through everything in detail, thanks. And I can eat and drink as normal before my appointment, can't I? That would be good.
Yes, no anaesthetic is involved. Now, I know you mentioned earlier that you can suffer from claustrophobia and wondered
I know you mentioned earlier that you suffer from claustrophobia.
if that might be an issue.
Well, maybe
You can suffer from claustrophobia and wondered if that might be an issue.
Well, maybe. I don't want to exaggerate things.
No, that's fine. We can administer a mild sedative if that would make you feel less anxious. It might help you lie still too. Remember, I'll be in a separate room operating the equipment, but we can communicate via an intercom. Have a think about what I've suggested.
So is the reason for talking to explain the procedure to be... Is the patient clear about a lot of things? Has the colleague already explained a few things to him?
Yes.
Yes.
They have explained.
Knows quite a lot about it. He knows whenever in your speaking cue card, why don't you relate to actual scenarios? Whenever there is a speaking cue card and your cue card says that the patient had, like, if you remember when you did that nerve radiculopathy cue card. So patient already had the diagnosis and the patient was concerned about it because they could not understand the diagnosis. So do you just straight away say, oh, hi, good morning. Okay, let me explain you about nerve radiculopathy. You don't do that, right? You elicit it from the patient. So it's always like a greeting thing and then eliciting a few details and then asking what the problem is. So this is what she's doing. She's first eliciting about the procedure and then she's using such a nice clue here. She's saying, as I know. So she already knows that he is concerned. Concern is feeling claustrophobic during MRI. So she's explaining him now that this and this will be done. Isn't she giving solutions? Isn't she reassuring by saying, okay, you will have this also and then there will be this also. This is how you reassure people. If they say, oh, I can't cook, I can't follow a healthy diet, I have a busy schedule. So you give them solutions, you say, you tell them things, you reassure them. So this is what she's doing here.
Be in a separate room operating the equipment, but we can communicate. It might help you lie still too.
I don't want to exaggerate things.
No, that's fine. We can administer a mild sedative. No anaesthetic is involved. Now, I know you mentioned earlier that you can suffer from claustrophobia and wondered if that might be an issue.
Well,
and wondered if that might be an issue. So she knows that the patient is concerned. It's written. If she is doing this cue card, relate. It's written in that prior information. The patient is concerned about feeling claustrophobic during the procedure. So she's saying, as I know that you have wondered, and this is your problem. So she
Maybe. I don't want to exaggerate things.
No, that's fine. We can administer a mild sedative if that would make you feel less anxious. It might help you lie still too. Remember, I'll be in a separate room operating the equipment, but we can communicate via an intercom. Have a think about
the sedative. I will be in a separate room. We can connect through an intercom. See, she's saying all these three things to reassure him about the concern is feeling claustrophobic during the procedure. You cannot find your answers just looking at the words. You need to understand the audios. It's all about the deeper understanding of the language. That's what part B and C is all about. And look for the cues. They always, I keep on telling you, they always give you clues. She did use that as a signpost, as you have shared, or as I know. So that was your clue. So that's her main reason for talking to him, because he was concerned about claustrophobia. Is it clear? Geeta?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
All right. What about 26? What does she want?
B,
Her
ma'am.
Again, this is specific detail. What does she is the nurse who is handling the patient. So what does she want her colleague to do? Action. This is an action. So look for the request, look for the instruction, anything where an action is coming, which the colleague has to perform. What did you say? B, ma'am. B?
B, ma'am.
B, ma'am.
B, ma'am.
B, ma'am.
B is the answer. All of us for B?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Excellent. Excellent. Then wonderful. If you've all picked B, then I can skip this one. Can I?
Yes,
ma'am.
27. If there is anybody who wants me to play for 26, they can please tell me.
No, ma'am.
Okay, I'll take 27 then. There is an orthopedic nurse talking to a patient, forthcoming hip arthroplasty. What is the patient most concerned? Okay, what is the patient most concerned? Again, you're going to look for this specific detail. Most concerned. There can be various concerns, but you're looking for the one which is concerning the patient the most. Okay, what's the answer, please? A, ma'am. A,
ma'am.
Using walking aids. How soon her other hip will need replacing is not her most, priority, the concern which is on priority. Let's listen.
Ma'am,
Anji, yes?
there is a lot of background noise, ma'am.
There is a lot of background noise.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh,
Yes,
please,
Yes,
everyone,
there
can
is
you
background.
mute yourselves? Thank you.
Had surgery and a metal plate insert. And although she could get to the toilet by herself, we need left hip. She's had... Next, Mrs. Mayfair was admitted 2 days ago. She had a fall and broke her left hip. She's had surgery and a metal plate inserted. She was off the morphine yesterday and is having 1 Panadine Forte every 4 hours. Her blood pressure's fine and her temperature's normal. Her mobility's still limited, and although she could get to the toilet by herself, we need to watch her, and we need to initial phase of physical.
27, I was playing
You hear an orthopedic read the question.
this one.
I know you've spoken to your practice nurse about your hip replacement, but I just wanted to check whether you had any questions for me at this stage.
My post-op arrangements are pretty much sorted. I live alone, but I know I'm going to need someone with me when I get out of hospital. I've got 5 friends who've offered to help out and live in with me. No one person will be in the flat for a lengthy period, so it shouldn't be too challenging for any of us.
So B is eliminated. She said 5 friends who will be living with me, but no one person will be living for a lengthy period. So will not be a problem for any of us. So she's not going to have people stay with her for so long. She'll have different friends coming and staying with her one by one. So B is out.
I've been told I'll need to be on crutches for 4 weeks. I'll need to be on crutches for 4 I've been told I'll need to be on crutches for 4 weeks. I used them when I broke my leg a few years ago, and I know what a pain they can be, so getting about with those is a worry. But I may have to have the other side done a few years down the line, so I'd better get used to it.
So what is the concern? Getting the other side done or using crutches?
Using crutch.
Yeah, using crutches.
Using crutches.
But I have the side done after a few years, so I better get used to it. So the worry is using crutches, possible difficulties using crutches, walking aids. Getting her hip done, yes, she will, but not now. It will take time. And she's just saying that I better get used to it before that. That's it. So A is your answer. Is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Administrator speaking to staff on general surgery ward, he says that time may be wasted when. So when is time wasted or when time will be wasted as per him? Answer?
Hey, ma'am.
A, that's correct. Information about a patient is unavailable. The second opinion is requested by patient. No. Details aren't clearly presented. No, details are missing. Let's listen for this one.
Surgery ward. Resources can best be used. We've been looking at the way our systems work and how our resources can best be used in order to improve our quality of service. We've identified a number of points where time isn't used as effectively as it could be, owing to faults in the system that could have been avoided.
So he said time isn't used as effectively as it could be due to the faults in the system. Now let's look at the faults in the system which are causing a wastage of time.
Example, there are cases where the results of all avoided. For example, there are cases where the results of all the relevant tests aren't ready for the first consultation with a patient, so then the patient has to have another consultation later on. We also have cases where patients' tests are being reordered unnecessarily, putting pressure on the other members of the team, and that leads to duplication in patients' notes, with details coming from different sources. So we need to look at what we can do about this.
So what is he saying? Is he saying that details aren't clearly presented? Or is he saying that details are not available, so they are again ordered?
Sometimes details are not available.
Yeah, sometimes, yeah, what are you saying? Meaning of? No, listen to it.
Putting pressure on the patient, so then the patient has to have a number of points where time isn't used as effectively as it could be, owing to faults in the system that could have been avoided. For example, there are cases where the results of all the relevant tests aren't ready for the first consultation with a patient, so then the patient...
So details of all the relevant tests are not ready for the first consultation. Are not ready. Are not ready is not presented. Are not ready is not available. And then what happens when they are not ready? They are ordered again.
has to have another consultation later on. First consultation with a patient, so then the patient has to have another consultation later on. We also have cases where patients' tests are being reordered unnecessarily, putting pressure on the other members of the team, and that leads to duplication in patients' notes, with details coming from different sources. So we need to look at what we can do about this.
So on consultations, the details are not available, they are not ready. So the patient has to have another consultation. And then there is a duplication of tests also, and then information coming from different sources. But that is not ordered or requested by patient. That is from the medical professionals. And then?
So we need to look at what we can do about this.
So C is close, but that's not your answer. He's not saying details are not clearly presented. He's saying details are not ready. So unavailable, and this is why the patient has to come again. And sometimes the tests are reordered and then it causes duplication of reports. So A, information about patient is unavailable, so time gets wasted. And what about 29? You hear an ophthalmologist talking to patient who has watery eyes. Okay. What does the patient think might be causing the condition? Patient think the cause of the condition. What's the answer?
C, ma'am.
C, ma'am.
Wonderful. Irritation caused by climatic conditions. Shall I play
C,
for
ma'am.
20? Was very easy? Yes, ma'am. Anybody for 29? Okay. Then
No.
last 30, what advice does she give them? She is the senior doctor, and what advice does she give? This was a little tricky, but let's see if you have picked the correct one. Yeah, which one?
A.
A.
A,
Wonderful.
ma'am.
Very nice. Don't assume older members of teaching staff have little to offer. She didn't use the word older. Do you remember what she used?
Senior.
Yes, something else also. You can listen to it once with me just to check what did she use for the
Gray
word.
hair, ma'am. Gray hair.
That's correct. That's what she used.
An ophthalmologist talk.
So, how long have you had this problem?
Now read.
What useful advice could you give us, Doctor?
Oh, let me think. Well, when I look back at my time in medical school, I remember some students on the course who had brothers or sisters to show them the ropes and the tricks of how to take shortcuts and still make a success of things, something I lacked, unfortunately. So I'd say finding a mentor is hugely important. The other thing I remember is that when I was taught by clinicians who had grey hair, I tended not to pay too much attention to what they had to say. I suppose I thought they weren't up with all the technical stuff that rules our lives. If I had my time again, though, I'd actively seek them out because of all the wealth of experience they've built up. They've learned what really matters, you see. Does anybody else have a question?
Yeah, so the older members, the ones who had gray hair, she did not pay much attention, but she says if I can get my time back, I'll go back and seek them because of all the wealth that they have, the wealth of knowledge she talks about. So don't assume they have little to offer. They do have too much to offer, wealth of knowledge. So try and get it. She will do that if she could go back in time, she says. So yes, A, excellent. So I think 4 or more than 4 will be correct here in part B. 4 at least?
5, ma'am.
4 at
Ma'am.
least?
5, ma'am.
Or 5. 5 is a very good number. 4 is also fair. Less than 4 is a bit of worry. Similarly in part A, yeah, 5 is very good. 6 is excellent. 5 is very good. 4 is good, fair, but less than 4, we need to work on the skills. Then in A part also, more than 20, I would say. So somewhere around 22, you should look forward to get around 22 correct answers from part A. So now you already are a very strong position. You are getting 22 from A and 4 to 5 from B. Let's see how many from C are correct. Shall we mark all answers first or shall we just go one by one?
All answers.
All answers.
Mark answers first.
All right. So please tell me for 31.
C, ma'am.
That's
A.
correct. C is the answer for 31. 32 is? C again.
C, ma'am.
Thank you. C for 32. 31C, 32C.
C.
Yes. 33,
B, ma'am.
33 is, that's
B.
correct. That's perfectly correct. B. These are the three, 31, 32, and 33. Then we are going forward to the last three here. 34. A.
A.
That's
A, ma'am.
correct. A. 35.
B, ma'am.
B. B.
It's A again.
A,
A,
ma'am.
ma'am.
A. Delhi, I'm sorry, the screen was blank for a moment. 34 is A, 35 is A, 36.
B,
ma'am.
C.
C.
C, that's correct. C. Now let's check for all of these one by one from the top. So you're getting 90 seconds in total. That means you have to spend on an average 15 seconds on one question. Of course, you can, on some questions, you can spend a little more seconds and on some questions a little less. But yeah, on an average, 15 seconds for each question again you're getting, but in total 90 seconds this time. So you do not have to retain any information. You just have to flash read your options, but you have to very, very nicely and clearly read your questions because your focus has to be on questions. This is how you read and listen and match. That's what you're doing for part C.
Part C.
Let's check for 30.
Senior nurse who's involved in trying to prevent the transmission of bacteria in hospitals. She's particularly interested in whether
It says Anna suggests that article about nurses' uniforms. So my question says, what does Anna suggest about the article on nurses' uniforms? What does Anna suggest on the article on nurses' uniforms? Let's now just
the bacteria can survive into this.
Survival of microorganisms explained that in hospital laundry,
About laundering hospital nurses'
guidelines are issued that year, which the data show uniforms could change at work. Washing uniforms at laundries operate under a set of national guidelines of the washing of work clothing.
Look at Part C.
I think it just hung and there is no sound coming.
Recently, the conditions in the UK.
Just give me a moment. Let me try again.
However, certain items like bed sheet centigrade, but
further work done in
between
is an issue are experiencing the same problems.
Well, I have looked at the food industry in the UK. They have
Part C. In this part of the test, you'll hear two different extracts.
conditions or their workplace at 60-degree uniforms. Those would be.
In each extract, you'll hear health professionals talking about aspects of their work.
It's not playing on my end. Is it playing on your end? Okay,
Yes,
just
ma'am.
a second.
Yes, ma'am, audible.
Okay, just a second then. I guess because it's disconnected from here, that's why. Just a second. We can't hear it. Now, probably.
She's particularly interested in whether bacteria can survive on healthcare workers' uniforms after washing. Today I'm talking to Anna Ratchford, a senior nurse who's involved in trying to prevent the transmission of bacteria in hospitals. She's particularly interested in whether bacteria can survive on healthcare workers' uniforms after washing. Anna, what research has been done into this?
Well, a decade ago, there was a comprehensive article which stated that there had been only a few studies into the survival of microorganisms on...
Now, as soon as she used the word article, your focus should be here. Now, what is she suggesting about the article? She's saying decades ago...
Live on healthcare workers' uniforms after washing. Anna, what research has been done into this?
Well, a decade ago, there was a comprehensive article which stated that there had been only a few studies into the survival of microorganisms on, for example, nurses' uniforms. The author explained that in hospital laundries that washed at low temperatures, say 40 degrees centigrade, microorganisms on the clothing were killed. The conclusion was that those temperatures would be similar to normal domestic washing machines, and therefore washing uniforms at home was safe.
So what did the article say? Did the article say that washing uniforms at home was safe?
No, ma'am.
Article didn't say that. You're not listening then. Listen again. What did the article suggest?
Into this.
Well, a decade ago, there was a comprehensive article which stated that there had been only a few studies into the survival of microorganisms on, for example, nurses' uniforms. The author explained that in hospital laundries that washed at low temperatures, say 40 degrees centigrade, microorganisms on the clothing were killed. The conclusion was that those temperatures would be similar to normal domestic washing machines, and therefore washing uniforms at home was safe.
Did the article suggest that washing uniforms at home was safe?
Yes, ma'am.
Abhibi, no. What are you listening?
Degrees centigrade,
Yes, the article is
microorganisms on the clothing were killed. The conclusion was that those temperatures would be similar to normal domestic washing machines, and therefore washing uniforms at home was safe.
Therefore, washing uniforms at home was safe. This is what the article concluded. This is what the article concluded, that washing uniforms at home was safe. Now, I am looking for these things here. Was correct in focusing on a range of common temperatures. Didn't examine the effects of washing in domestic machines sufficiently. Should no longer be relied upon due to recent developments in the hospital. Now, she's just suggesting about the article. At first, she's saying the article suggested that as low as 40 degrees, even if you wash the uniforms at home, it is safe. So whether you wash the uniforms at hospital or whether you wash uniforms at home, it is safe on being washed at 40 degrees. Now, what does she add to it?
That seemed satisfactory was that those temperatures would be similar to normal domestic washing machines, and therefore washing uniforms at home was safe. That seemed satisfactory at the time. Recently, though, there's been more interest.
That seemed satisfactory at the time. Recently, though. So when she said recently, though is an informal way of saying although, and although is a clause of contrast. Although, yeah, that means she's going to change her opinion now. So if she was saying that it was safe, so now she's going to say it's unsafe. That's why she's using although. Listen to her, how she's connecting her idea. She says article suggested, decades ago it was done, it suggested washing uniforms at home was safe. Recently, though,
That seemed satisfactory at the healthcare textiles. Washing uniforms at home was safe. That seemed satisfactory at the time. Recently, though, there's been more interest in healthcare textiles as potential sources of cross-contamination with the environment and patients. This is, of course, particularly important currently in the light of increasing hospital-acquired infections and antibiotic-resistant bacteria.
I see.
So these are the recent developments in the hospital, and this is why the article can no longer be relied on. It seemed satisfactory, reliable at that moment. Recently, though, there are these recent developments. So What she means is, it doesn't work anymore. Yes, Amit?
Ma'am, sorry to interrupt, ma'am.
It's okay. Yeah, go
Ma'am,
on.
actually, ma'am, I was choosing this team first, ma'am, but she told that, ma'am, what option is telling that recent development in hospitals, ma'am, and she told that developments or any kind of mutation in diseases. It is talking about that, I think.
Okay, so what
Disease
have
has
you
been
picked?
developed. I agree, ma'am.
Why though? Did she say that
Ma'am,
it was correct in focusing on range of common temperatures?
that I assume, ma'am, that is wrong. But ma'am, this C, it's a little bit concerning, ma'am, because here it is written development in hospitals.
So I always tell you, when it becomes difficult for you to find the correct answer, go with elimination. When she is not talking about, is she talking throughout the response? Did she talk about range of temperatures anywhere? She just
No,
said
ma'am.
40 degrees. And
Yes,
even if
yes,
you
ma'am.
wash at home, the article said it's safe. So no range.
Ma'am,
So
actually,
wrong.
ma'am, what idea was showing the way it was towards C, ma'am. Right, ma'am. But the thing is towards development in hospitals. It
I will
makes
come to
sense.
that also. I will come to that also. But that is, of course, after re-listening that we are getting into that detail. Our focus should be that we listen to the audio just once and we find the answer. Of course, we can get into the details. We can listen, re-listen. We can listen 3-4 times and exactly find the meanings to match. But we are not getting that much time during the exam. They are going to play audio for us only once. So we need to first learn this technique, that how will I find answer in just one go. Of course, later on, just to enhance my understanding of the language, I can re-listen and match, but my first priority should not be matching everything in part C, because I'm not getting that much of time, and as a human being, it's out of my capabilities also to listen and match that much of language. So let's work smart here. If she is not talking about range of washing temperatures, I cannot pick A. B says the article didn't examine effects of washing in domestic machines sufficiently. She's not talking about sufficiently, and she's saying at that time it was satisfactory. So people believed in that article at that time, she means. Listen again, the whole of it, and try and match. And then we can talk about the word development.
Anna, what research has been done into this?
Well, a decade ago, there was a comprehensive article which stated that there had been only a few studies into the survival of microorganisms on, for example, nurses' uniforms. The author explained that in hospital laundries that washed at low temperatures, say 40 degrees centigrade, microorganisms on the clothing were killed. The conclusion was that those temperatures would be similar to normal domestic on the clothing were killed. The conclusion was that those temperatures would be similar to normal domestic washing machines, and therefore washing uniforms at home was safe. That seemed satisfactory at the time. Recently, though, there's been more interest in healthcare textiles as potential sources of cross-contamination with the environment and patients.
This is what she's referring to as development. You understand?
Yes,
She's
ma'am.
not talking about mutations. She's talking about development in hospital textiles. This is the recent development.
That seemed satisfactory at the time. Recently, though, there's been more interest in healthcare textiles as potential sources of cross-contamination with the environment and patients. This is, of course, particularly important currently in the light of increasing hospital-acquired infections and antibiotic-resistant bacteria.
I see. So what?
So these changes in the textiles, these interests which were changing, which was important due to the mutations, the viruses and all, which were, resistance to the bacteria, which were resistant to antibacterial, or the virus which were resistant to antivirals. So of course, about the mutations and all she's talking, as you said, but that's not the development. The development is in the hospital textiles. That's the recent development. So she's saying, as per now, the recent development suggests that we cannot trust that article, which was done decades ago. Yeah.
Yeah,
Now,
thank you.
eliminate. Range of washing temperatures was not done in that article, was just saying, yeah, 40 degrees is okay, it's enough. Then the article didn't examine effects of washing in domestic machines sufficiently. No, because that article was considered to be satisfactory at that time. So at that point of time, whatever the article suggested, people were believing in that. It seemed satisfactory at that time, she said. Recently, though. So when she said recently, though, with her, your opinion should also change. And on the whole of it, you can just pick C. Even if you do not get each and every word here, at least you're getting this general point that she's saying that article cannot be trusted. That article had a very different conclusion to washing uniforms, which is not done these days, or that article is not something which we can rely on. So just on that basis, you can pick C answer. So of course, you're flash reading your options. So when the audio is playing for these tricky and complex ones, you will not be easily getting it. But then you have to just, like when you're matching, you have to just go through the overall meaning of that option and match. Is she saying A? Nowhere she talked about range, so no. Did she say it didn't examine the effect of washing at home? Not at all. She said it was satisfactory. So go like that. Of course, when you're re-listening, when you're practicing at home, when you want to enhance your language, you can re-listen, and then that point of time you can focus on the language and you can think that why did I miss it the first time when I was listening? That you can do later. But when you're listening for the first time, your priority should be getting it correct very first time you listen. Okay? So sometimes we just need to eliminate. And dictionary meanings cannot be found.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. So Anna's view on domestic washing guidelines in the hospital. Now you're looking at Anna's view on the guidelines for washing.
What guidelines exist now about laundering hospital nurses' uniforms?
Well, in some countries, all uniforms are laundered in the hospital under strictly regulated conditions. In the UK, however, certain items like bed sheets, scrubs and curtains are washed in-house, while nurses mostly take their uniforms home and wash them there. What's interesting, though, is that all hospitals...
Getting these little things here. However, what's interesting, though? So what's interesting, though, is a clue that this could be my answer. What's interesting, though, for her?
Are washed in-house, while nurses mostly take their uniforms home and wash them there. What's interesting, though, is that all hospital laundries operate under a set of national guidelines, but domestic laundering guidelines are issued by individual hospital trusts. Admittedly, these are based on government rules, which specify a minimum washing temperature of 60 degrees centigrade. But the worrying thing is that a questionnaire of nursing staff in 4 hospitals in 2015 showed that not all of them were sticking to the guidelines on minimum temperature. It also highlighted inconsistent guidance across the hospitals on whether uniforms should be washed separately and how to dry them.
Interesting.
Are you getting it? Now she gave such a detailed explanation, but your answer is short. But can you not match these words? Worrying, concerned. Key, very, she said different. Key aspects she didn't say, but she said some of those. So is she unsure how strict guidelines are? Not at all. She's not unsure. She's sure that those are. Yeah, she was. But is she unsure how strict they are? She's
No, ma'am.
sure they are not strict about them. She's not unsure about them, is she?
No, ma'am. Even so, the staff are not sticking to the guidelines.
And she's sure that hospitals are not sticking to it. So she's sure that they are not strict about the guidelines. So we never look for the word guidelines. She will keep on using it. It's in the question. It's in the options as well. It can be thrice or 4 times used in the response, but I cannot just look for the word guidelines. Is she unsure about the strictness of the guidelines? No. She's sure that hospitals are not strict about following them. She said it in the very beginning. However, when she used, then she thinks that stated temperature is too low. Did she say that the temperature is too low? She
No,
never
ma'am.
used. So you can listen again and try and match C. Concerned, she said worryingly. Very, she said different. Now, key aspects you can find. The word key aspects was not used, but there was a list. Listen again.
Trusts. Admittedly, these are based on government guidelines, but scrubs and curtains are washed in-house, in the hospital,
I see. So what guidelines exist now about laundering hospital nurses' uniforms?
Well, in some countries, all uniforms are laundered in the hospital under strictly regulated conditions. In the UK, however, certain items like bed sheets, scrubs and curtains are washed in-house, while nurses mostly take their uniforms home and wash them there. What's interesting, though, is that all hospital laundries operate under a set of national guidelines, but domestic laundering guidelines are issued by individual hospital trusts. Admittedly, these are based on government rules, which specify a minimum washing temperature of 60 degrees centigrade. But the worrying thing is that a questionnaire of nursing staff in 4 hospitals in 2015 showed that not all of them were sticking to the guidelines on minimum temperature. It also
Not all of them were sticking to the guideline on minimum temperature.
highlighted inconsistent guidance across the hospitals. On whether uniforms should be washed separately and how to dry them.
These are the key aspects, and they were not similar. These key aspects were different hospital to hospital, and this is the worrying thing, so she is concerned about it. That's your answer.
But ma'am, in question, the keyword was what was the view about the guidelines?
So what do you expect her to say? Do you expect her to say, "Hi, Bernarda, this is my view on the guidelines"? Do you expect that? You're not going to get that. Whatever is she responding, that's all her view. Right? So she is saying, interestingly though. So when she said interestingly though, that means she is taking you closer to your answer option here. So look for these kind of words. You can find these signposts, connectors, linkers, but you will never find as it is words. If you try and find them, you might end up picking a wrong answer because we are matching meanings. We are not matching words. If we were doing an English test in school, then probably we would be matching. Okay. Now, third, Anna says that work carried out in 2017 was important because means reason. So why does Anna find or say that this work carried out in 2017 was important? Why was it important?
Interesting. I believe there was some further work done in 2017. Is that correct?
Yes, there was a study that year which was done under lab conditions. Researchers washed uniforms in the way the nurses described in the 2015 questionnaire. The researchers wanted to assess whether bacteria such as Staphylococcus aureus and E. coli could survive on uniforms. The data showed both bacteria could survive between 7 and 21 days. So that raises the question of how dirty uniforms should be stored at home. As far as temperature was concerned, the study found that most microorganisms were killed at 40 degrees centigrade. But there was a risk that domestically laundered uniforms could contaminate the nurse's home or their workplace. At 60 degrees centigrade, no microorganisms could be detected.
Do you know whether other work...
So again, C says it proved a temperature of 40 was sufficient to remove all bacteria. She said 60. 60 is sufficient. It showed most microorganisms exist on clothing for about a week. Not most. Some did for 7 to 21 days. Not even a week. 7 to 21 days. So again, eliminate the wrong ones. Yeah, you can eliminate C and A. And then she did say they could contaminate their house. So potential domestic hazard. And why did you do that? Okay, I'm going to tell you one more thing here, and it happens quite normally. Maybe you have experienced it. Some of the students did discuss it earlier. You have this thing in mind that C is difficult. So sometimes you find answer, but then you don't trust yourself thinking, oh, how did I find it? It was meant to be difficult. How could I find it so easily? And then you end up looking for a more difficult explanation, which is not there. And then you just change the option and you pick something else. So please trust yourself, first of all. When you're listening and matching, when you're practicing, then you're working on a technique which you automatically have developed by practicing these tests every day. So you need to trust yourself. You need to get 8 correct answers, which you will get. So even if here and there you get some wrong, we are taking, like, we are considering all of that. We are not asking you to find all 12 answers. So please don't think ever that it is always difficult and how did I find it, and then end up choosing a wrong one. Once the audio is over, once that response is over, and once the next question has started, whatever you have picked is your final answer. There is no point changing it. Now the audio has gone. So before the audio plays, things might not make sense. When you're just reading questions, a lot of things might not make sense, but that is okay because you're not having the context. It's not like reading in which there is a paragraph and then there are questions. So you just keep understanding. You read the question, you read the paragraph, put 2 and 2 together, and yes, bingo, you go there. You understood the meaning. It's not like that. They're giving you 90 seconds to read the information. So just go with that. Focus on the question and just understand what my question exactly is asking me to find. Quickly read through the options. And now when the audio is playing, things will start making sense. All of it together. And now you're matching the ideas and picking the answer. Okay, let's try 34. Let's do that. Anna points out that UK food industry differs from many hospitals by. So there is something like by means by what? So what is making UK food industry different from hospital industry? Yeah, by what? So Anna points that UK food industry differs from hospital by what? So what is making them different? So one different thing between food industry and hospital industry, that's what you're finding. It's worth investing a few seconds on the questions rather than investing a lot of time on the options. Because from 3, only one option is going to correct. The rest of them are either wrong or not there in the audio. So focus on the question. And then
Areas where contamination is an issue, our experience is an issue, Do you know whether other work areas where contamination is an issue are experiencing the same problems?
Well, I have looked at the food industry in the UK. They have one nationwide biocontamination control standard rather than locally generated guidelines.
So they have one control standard rather than locally generated guidelines. That's the first different things. But then that's not in my option. So I have to keep listening further.
It ensures, among other things, that clean and dirty laundry is separated. Staff have to change at work, and they're not allowed to keep their uniforms on during their journey to and from work, unlike many healthcare workers.
Unlike, is that the word? Unlike many healthcare workers, the staff working at food industry is not allowed to travel in that uniform. They come to the workplace, they change, and then before leaving, they change again. So they're not allowed to wear the uniform to and from work. While commuting, they are not allowed, unlike many healthcare professionals. So insisting that work clothing is only to be worn at workplace. They cannot wear it anywhere else, not even while traveling back home.
Uniforms on during their journey at work, and they're not allowed to keep their uniforms on during their journey to and from work, unlike many healthcare workers. These guidelines include a minimum temperature too, but it's higher, 71 degrees centigrade, and they advise that a specialist company takes care of the washing of work clothing.
Why do you think some healthcare...
So B says recommending a particular temperature for washing work clothing. The hospitals also recommend, but in their case, it's sometimes different, or 60, 40, whatever she was saying. So those are local hospitals are giving different guidelines. So not one is being followed. So particular temperature, yes, but from various hospitals, the instructions are coming to the staff members. Then suggesting some work clothing could be washed in laundries at work, not some. All should be washed at work by a specific agency that they have hired. And for the food industry, the minimum temperature is 71 degrees. So unlike healthcare industry, the staff working at food industry is not allowed to wear their work clothing at any other place other than where they work. That's it. A is your answer. Any questions so far? I'll pause here and ask. Shall I move on? Okay, then Anna believes.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Anna believes some nurses do not follow domestic washing guidelines because. Now, reason why some nurses are not following domestic washing guidelines. Why they are not following.
staff don't follow the guidance they're given?
I think of the washing of work clothing.
Why do you think some healthcare staff don't follow the guidance they're given?
I think there are a number of reasons, actually. The guidance about...
I think there are a number of reasons. So you should be ready to listen to a number of reasons and match one which is given here. The number of reasons are what?
Washing clothing after every...
they're given.
I think there are a number of reasons, actually. The guidance about washing clothing after every shift may be difficult to follow if nurses aren't provided with sufficient changes of uniform.
Number one, the changing of uniforms is difficult to follow if there is no time. But is any of the options talking about time? No, not enough time to change? No. Then I'll keep listening and match.
Provided with sufficient changes of uniform. That's an ongoing issue. Guidance about washing clothing after every shift may be difficult to follow if nurses aren't provided with sufficient changes of uniform. That's an ongoing issue in some trusts. A number of hospitals do have on-site laundries, but staff still prefer to wash their uniforms at home. This could be partly because it's a long way from the wards to the changing and laundry facilities right across the hospital site. Then there's the minimum temperature issue.
So they don't wash at the site because that's a long way from the hospital to that site. So it's a lot of distance to cover. But again, any of the option is not talking about
There's a commonly held view that washing at there's the minimum temperature issue. There's a commonly held view that washing at lower temperatures is better for the planet, which is very persuasive.
There is a commonly held view that washing at lower temperatures is better for the planet, and it is very persuasive. Okay, now keep listening.
Also, don't forget that domestic washing machines are hard to regulate, and more efficient, up-to-date ones can cost a lot.
Domestic washing machines are hard to regulate, and more up-to-date ones cost a lot. So look at C. Using washing machines is expensive? No. Up-to-date ones, the advanced versions, those are very costly. So they know that their washing machines are expensive? No. They think hospital laundries will damage their uniform? No.
So what could and should...
Now the response is over. Did they say it's good for the planet? Nurses,
Yes, madam.
planet. That's environment friendly. Washing at low temperatures is good for the planet and is very persuasive. That means it's a trend. It's a trending view. Whatever is trending is persuasive. People follow that. So nurses don't wash at home. There are many reasons which are not in the options. The one which is in the options is that they do it for the planet. They think washing at low temperatures is good for the planet. Environment friendly. Then what does Anna think hospitals should do to improve infection prevention?
Be done to improve matters.
Hospitals could increase staff awareness about infection prevention and get a development program going.
Staff awareness and development program should quickly take you to the training option. Introduce specific training, awareness, development.
The government could certainly introduce a national policy on the domestic washing of uniforms. Those would be useful steps. The ideal solution, though, would be to insist nationally on in-house laundering to avoid cross-contamination in the home.
So she's not saying upgrade their own guidelines. She's saying it's better to follow the national guidelines. Require all staff to change their uniforms before leaving.
And increase the chances of uniforms on in-house laundering to avoid cross-contamination in the home and increase the chances of uniforms being washed safely. It would mean that hospitals would need to invest in convenient facilities for staff to get dressed and undressed, of course.
So she's saying hospitals what should they do to improve infection prevention? Introduce specific training programs on how to keep development and awareness, she said. So C. Any doubts for this one? Okay, let's just mark answers for the last one. 37.
C, ma'am.
C, ma'am.
Absolutely. That's correct. 38. B. Mass in the abdomen. Okay, someone's phone is very close, I guess, to the mic. 39. C.
C, ma'am.
9C.
That's correct. 40. A.
A, ma'am.
41.
B, ma'am.
C.
B.
And 42.
C.
C.
C, ma'am.
C.
42 is C. Let's check. 37. I'm playing for 37 now.
We know that the right outcome can't be guaranteed. Elderly people is bringing new challenges to our health services. To illustrate the special needs of this segment of the population, I'd like
Describing medical history of an elderly patient called Jane, Dr. Booker suggests that. So
Hi.
it is that kind of a question when you have in order to. So why is he describing an elderly patient's history? In order to do what? Or what is he highlighting? Or what is he suggesting by discussing medical history of an elderly patient called Jane? What is the point he is trying to convey?
I'm Daniel Booker, and today I'd like to talk about how we can best support the needs of elderly patients who have to undergo surgery. We know that the rise in the number of elderly people is bringing new challenges to our health services. To illustrate the special needs of this segment of the population, I'd like to take the case of a patient who we'll call Jane. Jane will be 100 years old in November. She has a history of coronary artery disease and high blood pressure, together with congestive heart failure, which are managed with medication. She has some osteoarthritis in her knee, but she's reasonably mobile for her age. She also has cataracts in both eyes, but she's decided not to have surgery for these. Her sight isn't too badly affected, and she's aware that at her age, a successful outcome can't be guaranteed. She has some hearing impairment, and so she wears a hearing aid. She was widowed 35 years ago. Since then, she's lived with her 2 daughters. Jane was brought to the emergency.
Now, is he saying that cardiac problems needed intensive treatment? Her state of health was unusual? Not at all. She's going to be 100 in November. So that's not at all unusual. So multiple chronic conditions were generally managed. Summarizing. He's just summarizing the medical history. A patient who was 99 plus, multiple chronic conditions were being managed. Then in the ED, emergency, tests and examination carried out on Jane gave conflicting evidence of. So what was conflicting? What evidence was conflicting in the ED when the tests and examination were done?
Department after developing abdominal pain, which had... Jane was brought to the emergency department after developing abdominal pain, which had started 5 days previously and gradually gotten worse. She'd had obstipation for the previous 24 hours and appeared uncomfortable and volume depleted. On examination, she was found to have abdominal distension and hypoactive bowel sound, but no mass was found in the abdomen.
No mass was found in the abdomen. On what? On doing what? Okay.
For the previous 24 hours and appeared uncomfortable and volume depleted. On examination, she was found to have abdominal distension and hypoactive bowel sound, but no mass was found in the abdomen. Blood tests indicated that her white blood count was slightly elevated and her potassium levels were low, but her hematocrit level was normal, as was her creatine. An abdominal CT scan was then carried out, and this showed that her sacrum was very dilated and there was a possible mass in the descending colon.
Descending colon.
Protocol would normally call and there was a possible mass in the descending colon. Protocol would normally call for an endoscopy at this stage, but that was omitted in Jane's case as the doctors realised that any delays in surgery would likely lead to complications, especially given Jane's age and pre-existing conditions.
So what was conflicting? What is the meaning of conflicting?
Ma'am, this earlier they said there was no mass in the abdomen.
And then they said there was.
The report from the patient and what was found on examination.
Yeah.
The mass.
That's right. So obstruction in the cecum was found in CT scan. Twisted bowel, they didn't talk about it. So a mass in the abdomen was not there, but obstruction as the cecum was there.
Yes,
so conflicting evidence of mass in the abdomen you will pick for. So a protocol would say that after CT, what should be done?
Mass in the descending colon.
Yeah, mass in the descending colon. What is the meaning of that? Why is it conflicting? You are healthcare professionals. It's conflicting. Yeah. Go on, please. Yes, you're explaining it.
Yeah, and in the first phase, they told that on examination they didn't find any mass. Then on CT abdomen they found it.
Absolutely. So then the protocol they said was
showed that her sacrum was very dilated. Blood tests indicated that her wall, as was her creatine. An abdominal CT scan was then carried out, and this showed that her sacrum was very dilated and there was a possible mass in the descending colon. Protocol would normally call for an endoscopy at this stage, but that
examination showed no mass. CT showed a mass in the descending colon. So now protocol calls for an endoscopy, which was not possible in Jane's case. So conflicting evidence of mass in the abdomen. It was conflicting in any other general patient who was not elderly, like a normal one. If the CT shows it, they would then do an endoscopy. But in her case, endoscopy was not done. That's why they straight away go to the surgery part. Like later in the audio, they talk about it. But yes, that's what he's saying is conflicting. Examination showed no mass. General examination, right? General physical examination showed no mass. CT showed mass. And then endoscopy was what the protocol calls for, but they are not doing it in her case. That's your next question. Dr. Booker explained that in Jane's case, endoscopy was omitted. So as per the protocol, they should go ahead with an endoscopy. But in her case, they are not doing endoscopy.
Levels were low, but her hematocrit level was normal, as was her creatine. An abdominal CT scan was then carried out, and this showed that her sacrum was very dilated and there was a possible mass in the descending colon. Protocol would normally call for an endoscopy at this stage, but that was omitted in Jane's case as the doctors realised that any delays in surgery would likely lead to complications, especially.
So that's your next answer also. Endoscopy was omitted because doctors decided any delay in the surgery might be risky. So surgery needed to be carried out urgently.
In Jane's case, as the doctors realised that any delays in surgery would likely lead to complications, especially given Jane's age and pre-existing conditions. She was therefore kept in the ED for 2 hours and stabilised with volume repletion. She was then admitted to a surgical unit and cared for by a general surgeon and a geriatrician. A left hemicolectomy was performed on day 2. Preparation prior to surgery had to be ideal because Jane.
Now, when describing preparation for the surgery, it was a surgery done on an emergency basis. So preparation for Jane's surgery, when he is describing, he gives examples of what?
Age meant she was at high risk. She was then admitted to a surgical unit and cared for by a general surgeon and a geriatrician. A left hemicolectomy was performed on day 2. Preparation prior to surgery had to be ideal because Jane's age meant she was at high risk of suffering an adverse outcome to an invasive procedure such as a major operation. However, she appeared well nourished with no evidence of malnutrition and a BMI of 24. Prior to her illness, she had been reasonably active and had never smoked, though, as we've seen, she did have circulatory and cardiac problems. Prophylactic measures against deep vein thrombosis and pulmonary embolism were put in place, and anaesthesia and intraoperative management were carefully planned. For a patient like Jane, suitable aftercare was also essential.
Now he's going to aftercare. So why is he giving examples of preparations for surgery? The ways in which patient involvement was encouraged? No. How some unexpected problems were eventually overcome? He's not discussing any unexpected problems. They are expecting problems. They know that she's very elderly. So in her case, there could be complications, especially with this kind of an invasive procedure. So the actions were taken. The preparation was done properly to support a successful result. So she recovers from the surgery and there is no risk.
However, she appeared well nourished with was performed on day 2. Preparation prior to surgery had to be ideal because Jane's age meant she was at high risk of suffering an adverse outcome to an invasive procedure such as a.
So preparations had to be ideal because Jane's age meant they were expecting risks. So to avoid them, they were going with proper preparations before
prior to surgery had to be ideal because Jane's age meant she was at high risk of suffering an adverse outcome to an invasive procedure such as a major operation. However,
so to avoid that adverse outcome, proper preparations were required. So this is why he's describing or giving examples of the actions they took to prepare her for the surgery. Then 41. When discussing Jane's aftercare, what does he suggest?
However, she appeared well nourished with no evidence of malnutrition and a BMI of 24. Prior to her illness, she had been reasonably active and had never smoked, though, as we've seen, she did have circulatory and cardiac problems. Prophylactic measures against deep vein thrombosis and pulmonary embolism were put in place, and anaesthesia and intraoperative management were carefully planned. For a patient like Jane, suitable aftercare was also essential following the operation. One post-operative risk is that the patient develops delirium. This appears to be more common if the patient's in an intensive care unit. In Jane's case, after the operation, she was provided with a single quiet room in a surgical ward, and one or the other of her daughters stayed with her continuously, sleeping there at night. Pain was controlled with low doses of morphine, and fluid management was carefully controlled. Her catheter was removed one day after the operation to reduce the possibility of a urinary tract infection, and she was turned 3 times a day to reduce the chance of pressure sores. She was encouraged to get out of bed as soon as possible, and her daughter's presence in the room helped to reduce the likelihood of her having a fall.
That's it. Her daughter's presence helped reduce the likelihood of falls. So that's post-operative risk. Daughters were present at all times. Long-term catheter was not there. Elderly patients are best treated in intensive care. No, she was shifted. Dr. Booker says that an important lesson to be learned from Jane's case is that. So what's an important lesson to be learned?
She was discharged to subacute rehabilitation on day 5, where she continued to make good progress, and she returned home on day 10. So, what lessons can we learn from Jane's case about the care of elderly patients who require surgery? Well, patients like Jane are more vulnerable with multiple comorbidities and minimal physiologic reserves, which can lead to problems if surgery is required, especially if the operation is an emergency and the opportunities for preparation and planning are limited. Post-operative complications are very common, especially in very old patients, and their occurrence can be devastating.
They are very common and their reoccurrence can be devastating.
The very old may tolerate major planning are limited. This can be devastating. The very old may tolerate major surgical operations, but they're not able to tolerate post-operative complications. More patients, such as
They can tolerate the surgeries, but they cannot tolerate post-surgical complications. So post-surgical complications are more dangerous than the operation for the elderly patients. So that's an important lesson that he's giving here. Last line.
Jane will be prominent in can be devastating. The very old may tolerate major surgical operations, but they're not able to tolerate post-operative complications. More patients, such as Jane, will be prominent in medicine in the future as the segment of the population over 85 years of age continues to grow. And we need to ensure that the facilities, not just for the procedures themselves, but for appropriate follow-up care, both in the hospital and following discharge, are put in place and are available to all who need them.
What is an important lesson to be learned from Jane's case? That elderly people may survive the surgery, but they cannot survive post-surgical complications. A is saying full recovery often requires long-term follow-up care. Often requires. Often. Every long-term, he did not say. Always follow-up care is required. So that's all. Any questions for part C? Any doubts? No? All right, then that would be it from my side. Please do send me your scores part-wise, so I can just have a look. And this week, we will have skill lesson on Wednesday instead of Friday, because last week's Friday's lesson could not be done because you had mock test on Friday. So let's do it on Wednesday this time. And tomorrow's test, you will have to do it for follow-up. It's an easy one and it's a practice test. So I'm going to share audio in the group after the class, probably around your lunch break. You can do it in the evening. Tomorrow we will discuss answers, and then day after we will have skill lesson. Okay. That's it. Okay, then thank you so much, all of you. Please have your lunch break. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Bye.